Hello again. Welcome to the third and last introductory video for the course. In this video we're going to be talking about how the format that I want all the papers written, APA format. Okay, here's a Trivial Pursuit question. Who remembers what APA stands for? There's a specific format for this thing, and some of it, quite frankly, doesn't make any sense. So just take the time to learn this. There's some excellent documents I put out there, and we're going to go through them. This is all in the supplemental material section on Blackboard. So here's a document I found on the web. I thought it was pretty cool. And it talks about, let's start from the very beginning. You're going to have a heading for every single page, and the heading is going to have the title of your paper in uppercase. Now, see, here's the title of the paper. And it's pretty doggone long, right? Varying definition of online communication and intersection. It flat didn't fit in this particular case, so they kind of chopped it off. So there's a page number that's flush to the right, and then an uppercase, sometimes truncated title. And on the first page, they have this text called running head. Now, if I go to the next page, the running head isn't there, and so you have just the title and the page number on every other page. So it's title, page number, title, page number. Now, let's say, for example, that the title didn't fit because of the words running head. So you had to shorten it, but it would fit if you did it that way? No. If you shorten it, it stays shortened throughout the entire thing. Okay. So, you should have a title, in who you are and perhaps what organization you're representing. And in my case, I want you to throw in a third item. I want you to throw in the due date. So you should have a title, your name, the name of the university, and a due date. And that's all that appears on the title page. So the title page looks like this. Now, I know this looks a little funky, having running head across the top, and then everywhere else it doesn't have running head. But hey, I didn't make up the rules. Okay, the next page is going to be the abstract. The word abstract is centered, and then it starts. Now, this is one of those strange things that just burn this in your brain. The paragraph in the abstract is not indented. This first line in the abstract is not indented. However, look, every other paragraph in the entire document has a leading indent, but not in the abstract. Again, why? I don't know, but this is how they do it. Everything in the document is double space. Okay. Typically, I want you to use like Times Roman or Arial, some generic kind of a font. I think I told you 12 point, I believe, in the assignment itself, but I'll have to double check that. So here's a note about things that show up in the abstract. You guys are probably familiar with abstracts if you're doing research. Like you'll do a research on the web, and you'll get an abstract to read. And you read the abstract and you go, wow, that's the article that I want. And then you push the button and you have to pay money to get a copy of the article. So in that respect, the abstract is a standalone document. It's not really designed to be like a movie trailer. Stay tuned for later developments and coming attractions. It's not designed to be talking about what's gonna happen. It's really designed to be a summary of your document so that somebody can look at the abstract and go, yes, I'd like to plunk down $5 or $6 so I can buy the article that contains your stuff. It's a summary of your document, not a thing of coming attractions. However, in this particular case, they actually have some citations for references. Now, although this is not necessarily a bad thing, and they do it in this example, remember that scenario I was telling you about, like you're doing a search? There are abstract places on the web where you can go and find abstracts. Well, if there's a citation, there's probably not a mechanism to show you that citation. because it's just an abstract. And so although it's allowed, it's kind of discouraged. So this is the format for doing an abstract. I don't particularly use the keywords thing. You can if you wish, but I'm not going to require it. Okay, this next is sort of like an introduction. Okay, now you'd think if it was an introduction, you'd have a heading that said introduction, but no. The heading is the title of your document. So you basically just repeat the title of a document in lieu of saying introduction. Again, that's a little weird, but that's the way it's done. So again, this one is indented. Yay! And you go along. Let's see if I can find some headings in here to talk about. Well, doggone it, there's hardly any headings in there at all. Okay, here's one. So here's a top-level heading, and top-level headings are centered and bold. There's other types of headings, and instead of being centered, they're flush against the left margin and bold. So that's essentially what they call a level 1 heading. I don't know if we have a level 2 heading in here. No, we don't. Okay. That's kind of the highlights of this. Let's see. There's going to be a separate page for references. Now, a lot of people get confused by what word goes up in here. For example, if you go into Microsoft, there actually is a heading, a way you can turn on APA to collect all your bibliography kind of things. And if I remember correctly, it actually picks the wrong word. It doesn't call it references. It calls it something else. So now these guys are indented, but this is the different kind of indent. Instead of having the first line indented in, it's called a hanging indent, where the indent is essentially backwards. These things are sorted in order, in alphabetical order based upon the author. So they're hanging indent, sorted in order, and there's an entire thing we're going to go about how this all works. So stay tuned for just a second. So that's a brief rundown of the format for how to do an APA paper. Break it up paragraphs, everything is double spaced. This funky stuff about abstract without an indent. The summary or introduction isn't really an introduction, it's just the title of a document written over again. Okay. So take a look at this. Here is another one on how to do tables and figures. So the way this thing works is you have a title page, abstract on the second page, the body of your document, references, tables, figures. It goes in that order. That almost sounds like a test question, doesn't it? So here's basically how you do tables. The table format is very strange. It has no vertical lines whatsoever. So a table looks like this. They have a line above, a line below, and you can optionally have some other lines in there. So on a separate page, you have a table number, the title of it in italics, and then this thing like this. And you can throw in some other stuff. A separate page per table. So if you have a table in your document, you're going to have to reference it somewhere else. You can't just throw a table in. You're going to have somewhere in the body of your document, you're going to have to say, you know, the results of this analysis is seen in table 1. I will tell you to avoid things like the table below, because when you may look like it's below, but by the time it went to the printer, it might actually appear on another page or above. So don't use above or below in trying to describe where things are. Okay, figures. Figures are an example on a separate page, and it's like, you know, figure 1, except, you know, table 1 was at the top, figure 1 is at the bottom. Again, consistency isn't necessarily how well they do. And this could be practically any type of graphic. You know, you have a photograph or whatever you want. So that's, in essence, how the tables and figures goes. What drives people crazy a lot is the citation. So this is a chart that I found. It has some other types of, but the APA one is the one in the center. So, you know, how to do a book, You know, how to do a book that has multiple authors. You know, how to do a magazine, a journal, a newspaper, you know, web kind of things. Now, I know you guys are going to go find web stuff because heaven forbid you'd get out of your chair to actually do any real research. But there's some techniques that you use to either find real honest-to-God documents or you can reference the web page itself. You know, kind of depending on what kind of research you're doing. It could require that you go to. So take a look at this as kind of a good place to start. Now, I've been teaching classes that have writing assignments for quite some time. And so I've gathered together kind of a compilation of previous grading notes from other classes. And I'm going to share them with you because I'm sure you're going to be making the same kind of mistakes that these other guys did. So let me just go through this. All right, the first one is the hardest concept for some people to understand. I actually have to beat this into their heads a couple of times before they actually understand. And it goes like this. I'm not asking you for a survey paper. You know, a survey paper is you go out and do some research and say, okay, I've researched 5 of these things and here's a summary of what I found. That's not what I'm asking you to do. I do not want you to just do a summary of other people's work. I want you to contribute to the work. And when I tell people that, they kind of go, well, could you give me an example? So I did some examples. You could do a survey yourself. You could do an interview yourself. And don't go get somebody else's survey or read somebody else's interview. I mean, quite literally, you do a survey or you do an interview. Do some calculations. Again, don't find somebody else's calculations. Do the calculations yourself. Do some sort of a comparison, a compare and contrast kind of a scenario. You can define your own criteria, evaluate options, and talk about why one scenario is better than another. You can use examples from personal experience. Now, there's other ways to generate content. Yes, you can analyze, you know, a topic and perhaps come up with a new or different or a contradictory conclusion. You know, you may say, you know, the author of this particular concluded the answer was 12, but I've read it and I think that the answer is really 14, you know, something of that nature. And of course, you could take a complex topic and digest it down to some easily understood conclusion. However, those are a little bit more complex, and you can use any technique you want. These are just examples. I mean, I'm not telling you you have to use these. And an example of poor or no original content is all you did was read a bunch of articles and summarize what the articles said. That ain't going to work. Or, well, I did that, and I threw some original contents in at the end, at the conclusion. No, that ain't what I had in mind. So, make it easy for me to figure out where this original content is. If I can't figure it out, I'm less likely to give you credit, right? Okay. The next one. This is not complex, but again, some people have problems with this. The only time you're allowed to cut and paste verbatim from some other source is when you're quoting them. And quoting them has to have some sort of a reason to quote them. It's got to be, you know, a person or an author who's actually saying something that's relevant. You can't just quote a section of a book, okay? That's not right. So as I'm saying here, some things are not quote worthy, meaning there's no significant tie to the author or the source. In other words, it's just you saw something that looked pretty cool in a book and you wanted to copy it. No. So in those cases, you cannot directly copy it, even if you cite the source. I have it in bold here. Remember, citing a reference does not give you a license to reproduce their work. You have no choice but to go through and rewrite the section in your own words. Don't just tweak it a little bit. You have to rewrite it. Okay, this is probably a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark, and we'll pick this up in just a few seconds.